Asah Dudes, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the 1964 bug, and we're going to try and get it running this video. We just picked up a whole bunch of parts for it. Here's the parts pile right here. Went and just got some gas because obviously this thing's been sitting a while, so we're going to have to drain the gas that's in there right now and then put fresh gas in there. It's just 87. And then we got some oil. These things take about 2.6 quarts, so I just got 4 just in case we ever needed to top it off. But it's 20 weight 50 if you guys are curious. What's weird about that, I've never seen any other vehicle run that except for these motors. Like my truck runs 10 weight 30, so seeing something like this is a little bit weird. But what else do we have here? We also got a new battery. We had to go get this emptied at O'Reilly's over there. And then air filter, fuel filter, all our plugs. This is a shift bushing for the shifter, and then here's the bolts for that. And then right here we got a new fan. The one on here is pretty corroded, so we're gonna freshen that up. And then we got a coil as well. 6-volt system on this car, so we had to get the 6-volt coil. And then right here, some just fresh fuel line. I don't know what condition these ones are in, but they've for sure been sitting a while. So since I'm doing the fuel filter anyways, I'm just gonna replace those as well, just to prevent any leaks or anything. The sun is starting to go down though. It's currently 4:37 or 16:37 military time. The plan of attack for this thing is just to start easy. I'm gonna throw that fan belt on there, and then we'll probably move on and do the fuel lines with the fuel filter. Just some cosmetic stuff first, and then we'll probably move on to the spark plugs right here. These guys got to get gapped to 28 thousandths, which they probably are already set to. I'll double check all of them, and then we'll throw them in the motor. And then we'll move on to an oil change, get the new battery in, new coil in there, and then we should be all good. I'm not going to put the air filter on just yet because to get it running, I'm just going to have that off in case we need to throw a little bit of fuel in there. But that's our plan of attack for tonight, so let's get started with getting that fan belt on there. So replacing these belts is pretty simple. The first thing you got to do is get the pulley for the generator off, and you just do that. You can use a crescent or a wrench, it doesn't really matter. And then you get a flathead like this, preferably big so you can hold it a little bit better. And there's these little slits on the pulley itself. So you're going to stick this in there and then lock it, and then you're going to crank right here and then get that bolt off, and it should all come out. So let's give that a whirl. Probably help with a little bit of WD-40 just to loosen up all the rust and everything in there. I'm sure this thing hasn't been off in at least a decade. There we go. There it goes. Loosen everything up. And then there's shims on there, so be mindful on how many are on the outside and on the inside, because that determines how tight the actual belt's going to be. So just count it when you're taking it off, and then that way you know when you're putting it back together it's going to be right. That's one way to do it. So now with that off, we can get the old belt out. You can tell on here it's all cracked and dried out, so it's a good thing we're replacing that because that probably would have gone pretty soon. So here's our new belt. Putting it back together is going to be pretty simple. I didn't remove any of the shims on here, so it should all just slide back together, and then this will all be on. And I'll just check the tension just to make sure it's all right. So I just got that back together. Didn't change any of the shims on there or anything. And just as a test, you should be able to turn that about 90 degrees. That means you're in pretty good shape. If you can turn it all the way around, it's way too loose and you need to change your shims. But right there, looks like we're perfect. So I just got started on getting the new fuel line in here. This is the old piece that came off of it. And I'm basically just going to replicate that with the new hose and the new fuel filter. And it's just going to be that replacement piece. So I'm going to get started with that right now. I'm going to reuse these hose clamps because I don't have any new ones. But we're going to get that together and get it on the car right now. So we just got that fuel line in there. It was pretty simple, just had it routed exactly how the last one was. So it was just a matter of matching up the lines and cutting the same lengths and just putting everything together. Now we're gonna move on to the coil. Like I said, I have the new one. It's just these 2 bolts holding it on, and then you got the wires connected to it. So just all I have to really do is remember what wires go where and unbolt it and put the new one in, and we should be good to go. Getting the coil in the car was super easy. It was just those 2 10mm nuts. They're bolts, man. Took those 2 10mm bolts, and the whole thing was out, and then you just take off the wire, and Getting the coil in the car was super easy. It just took those two 10mm bolts and the whole thing came out, and then you just had to unplug the wires. So now I'm going to move on to spark plugs. Like I said, these things are supposed to be gapped to 28 thousandths. I checked the first one and it was spot on. Usually they are, but it's always a good idea to double check everything and make sure that they're all right. So I just have my little tool here. I'm going to go through and check all of them. So just like that, all the spark plugs are gapped and they can now go in the car. That was awesome. Awesome ender right there. So I just started doing the spark plugs on the Bug, and I ran into kind of a weird issue that I thought I'd bring up to you guys. And that has to do with the actual ends on the spark plugs. Here's the new and the old side by side. And you can see on the old one that it's a threaded end, and the new one has a pronged end. And what's weird about that is on the actual the wire set itself, the threaded end is what goes in, and you can hear it click in. The new pronged end actually doesn't even go in, but you can see that it is threaded right here, so you can remove this piece and put new ones in there. So I don't know if that's just the old wire set, and once you go to a newer wire set, that these will work. So I thought I'd just bring those up. These old plugs, the last owner said she actually replaced these when she was trying to get the car running. So they all look good. I'm just gonna go back through them and just check the gap and then put anti-seize on them and put them back in. I'm not even gonna move to these guys because these look fine. So I'm gonna do that right now and then save these for later. Good morning, guys. Back out here today working on the Bug. Last night we did get all these spark plugs in. We did leave one out though. That way we can check for spark a little bit later. And then we left the coil wire off the distributor. That way we can crank the motor and just get the oil worked around in there without actually firing up the motor. Last night Christian did get this battery in and we hooked everything up, and none of the lights or anything worked. So that was kind of disappointing, but I'm thinking that's due to this ground right here. It can kind of swivel on there, and I'm sure there's a little bit rust behind there. So we're gonna take that off today and just clean that up and make sure we have good ground, and then we'll check again if all the lights and everything work. We're having another weird issue with the ignition on this car. This is the original cylinder, and this piece is actually kind of rare. A lot of them go here, but this was just another option that gives you steering lock too. But this is the ignition that was in here. This has been replaced by the previous owner and it was plugged into these wires right here. But this one, it is for these year cars, but it's for the ones that the cylinder actually gets mounted right here. So preferably I'd get one for this, but they're super difficult to find. So for now I am gonna run this since it will work. I did find the little wiring diagram for it here, but as you can see, one of the connections broke off. So I'm just gonna resplice that and get this on there the right way. That way we have a good working ignition. Fast forward a little bit, and I did just get that new connector on there. And I put a little bit of electrical tape on the backside just to prevent any shorting. It's not the cleanest thing I've ever done, but it's gonna work for this application. Now it's time to just plug the connectors onto these prongs on the ignition. I'm gonna do that. I have a little wiring diagram here, which I'll put on the screen. And that's just off of JBug's website, telling me what the factory color coding is in order to get these connected. And on the ignition itself, let's see if I can get an angle for you. It's kind of difficult to get an angle, but you can see the numbers on here. There's 30, 50, and 1554, and that's just different meanings. So on here it says 30s for the battery power from the headlight switch, 1554's power to the fuse block, and then the 50 is for the power to the starter. And then again, here's the factory color coding that we're going to be going off of. So we do have that black wire, the red wire, and then this one's the red with the black stripe on it. So it's just a matter of getting this connected now. Pretty simple, just slide those on, and now we got a working ignition. I might zip tie this up somewhere or eventually drill a hole if I can't find the legit one for this car. But for now, this is hopefully just temporary, just to get the car running and driving. But now we're gonna move back and do the battery on the car and try and get a good ground established for the battery back there. So I pulled that ground wire off, and just as I thought, you can see where the mounting hole was right there. You can see it's pretty rusty, so that wasn't a good ground. We're gonna get that cleaned up with some sandpaper, and then get it resecured on there and throw the battery back in. Everything's back together now. That ground's a lot better. I replaced the bolt going through there as well, and actually grinded the ground itself, the wire a little bit, just so it's a fresh surface. And then again, I did sand the cab a little bit. And then came in here, I already tested the radio, and as you can see, we got power, so that's good. And then turn the key just to the on position. Sorry, that was hard to do with one hand, so I did it off camera. But you can see our lights are on for the oil pressure and for the battery, so that's good to know. So at this point, we could throw a little bit of gas in there and try and start it, but I'm just gonna do the extra step since I have the time now. We did replace the fuel lines back here, just going from the fuel pump to the actual carb, but the hard line coming out of the fuel pump, back there, it goes to a soft line again. So I'm gonna replace that piece just since I have the time. And then it goes hardline from the car back up to the front even more. And then back under right here, under the car, I can't really get an angle on it, so I'm just gonna explain it. It goes from the hardline back to the soft line into the tank. So I'm just gonna replace those two pieces just cause I can and just as some more reassurance to know that nothing's gonna leak. So I'm gonna do that right now and then we should be able to start this thing. So I just dealt with those fuel lines. They were a bit trickier than I originally thought. The one in the back took a little bit of time, but the one in the front took the most time. I actually had to take the passenger side wheel off in order to get room to stick my hand up in there and pull the lines off. And there's a lot of gas that came out of there. We did drain the tank earlier, tried to siphon as much fuel out as possible, but honestly, we didn't get that much because when I pulled the line, I had a bucket on standby, but at least a gallon came out, probably 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons. So all that's out now and we got all the new line in, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. The next step's just gonna be to check the oil level, make sure we have enough in there just to run it for a little bit. So I'm gonna check that right now and then we should be clear to start it. The oil level is literally perfect on this thing. So right now with the coil wire off, I'm gonna get in and just crank the starter for a little bit and let the oil cycle around in there. And then we'll connect all the wires back. We're gonna check for spark. And then if that's all good, we're gonna put the spark plug back in and try and fire this thing up. Alright guys, we just checked for spark and we didn't have any initially, so I cleaned the points and reset the gap on that. My dad and I made sure that we had electricity going through everything and everything looks to be good, and we now have spark. So right now we're going to try and fire it up, put a little bit of starting fluid in here, and then the gas has been just coming through a little bit. So we're going to try and crank it over and see if this thing will start. Very good. Oh yeah, what the? That was way easier than I thought it was going to be. It literally fired up like that. So there we go, it runs, it drives. We just washed it, got all that stuff off from it sitting for so long. And it looks super good, I'm super happy with it. This thing started up like that and just blew a whole cloud of stuff out the back and just cleared itself out. It does need a few adjustments as expected, but I'm gonna be doing that pretty soon. Just getting everything running like it should be. Just clean the windows and everything. It came out super nice. I'm gonna get this thing warm, put it in the garage and change the oil right now, but I'm not gonna film that. I'm gonna do that all off camera. But if you guys like this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.